Ancient Albatross here again with the Cypher Unlimited crew. We have our usual suspects of AD or Alpha Dean. We have Spigs18 or Anthony. And Dean, what are we doing here today?
Well, we're here to do what we always do: talk tabletop RPGs, talk Cypher System, and talk an idea, a concept, something that goes on in these things that we do called tabletop. So today we're going to talk about games in modern, set in the modern era, you know. And Anthony's just going to jump right in, let us know, swing the bat and get this thing started.
Yeah, we didn't really have a topic earlier today, so we kind of we're tossing around ideas, and with the Heroes of Cypher System, zooming along its stretch goals as we speak right now. Hopefully, by the end of this stream, they'll hit 100K, and we'll get our first book in there. But since they had first responders, it made me think of modern games and games set in periods that actually follow the laws of science and physics for that era. So not only are we going to talk about being a player and a GM for modern games, but also being a player and a GM for period pieces. Whether it's 1970s street gangs, or the
Horror
Crusades or the Roman Empire or whatever. We want to follow games that actually have a base in modern science.
Yep. And I also linked the Kickstarter in the chat for anyone who hasn't seen it or is not aware of it. The one that Anthony just mentioned, the Heroes of Cypher System. We're very much looking forward to that. So definitely take a look. We want to hit all the stretch goals we can because they always put out good stuff.
Yeah, and
Absolutely.
Like we said, first responders inspired this conversation. So my first question, we'll throw out there is, what do you consider? Well, how do you define the modern game? Like, what's that definition to you personally?
You want to take it first, Al?
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much hit the nail on the head with what you said earlier, where it's a game that follows like real life physics or laws or whatever you want to call it, and set in a real like time era, not like futuristic or anything. It could be again period piece like in the 70s or 20s or whatever have you. But again, a modern game has to take elements from those eras and incorporate them into the story or whatever have you. So again, the players feel like they're in that time or that modern age. That's like a basic definition. I mean, again.
Yeah, yeah, I'll grow right along with that. I mean, anything that's happened, say, know, since the Industrial Revolution, things like that would definitely fall into a modern piece for me. Um, Also, from the terminology or from the perspective we're going at it is definitely, anything that's not going to involve the supernatural or, weird science or, steampunk and stuff like that. But, things that are actually going to talk about, what a regular steam engine did or, coal-fired trains and all that kind of stuff, murder mysteries and, things along those lines. I've done a couple of disaster games based on disaster movies that came out. Like I did the San Andreas one and I did a wildfire one. So stuff like that.
So, with speaking of, do you want to tackle it from a GM's perspective at first, or do you want to tackle it from actually being what you have to bring to the table as a player when you're playing in these sorts of styles of narratives?
We can actually go. Well, let's go from player facing first, because
Okay.
GM is easy. Players, kind of one of
I
the.
think I will view it differently, but I think it's a lot easier as a player than it is as a GM. But we could definitely tackle it from the player perspective. So if you're being recruited for a game, okay, let's just say, and what is your mindset? What's your thought process? You know, let's say we're playing, because this is fresh in my head, 1950s Prohibition era. I'm sorry, 1920s Prohibition era, um, like roaring 20s gangster style game, what's your mindset like when you're creating a character or when you're designing your character? What's the process you're going through, to make it the life as easy for the GM as you possibly can?
A lot of times in that, if you want to put it like that, especially like, okay, we're saying roaring 20s, gangster. I'm going to, think, depending on who the game master, if I know it's really supposed to be serious, then I won't like try to tap into some of the more campy tropes that you had with the gangsters. They all had a funny accent, and everybody had a whine to their voice. You know what I'm saying, guy? And they talk like this. Everybody had terrible accents and stuff. So th- that portion. But if it's gonna be something serious, I'd probably want to give the game master, some of those more, iconic ideologies, where they're the tough guy, they're the silent, but everything they said had a bit of wisdom. So, and then have a nice little background story that I could feed into to kind of give the game master fodder, stuff to play with. That's kind of my approach.
Well, for me, when I go into a game, whether it be 1920s or whatever kind of modern game, I always try to stay close to what the GM is trying to present. While it might be fun to like use these fantastical foci or abilities or whatever have you, you have to remember that you're being asked or you're trying to join a modern game. So put that stuff to the side, leave it for the fantastical games, and try to focus on the stuff that really lets your character fit into what's going on. Like use those more, not, I wouldn't say mundane because they all do kind of cool things, but things like is licensed to carry or solves mysteries or things like that. It's again, it's easiest to find yourself a place in these games when you do look at these more. Again, I hate to use the word mundane because they aren't really mundane. More, I guess, realistic, I guess, is a better
or
word.
or you
Or
could
less
also,
fantastical.
Yeah,
typical,
but either way
more
though,
typical character
um,
types.
those things can be really fun to play with, and again, you always have to come to I mean, at least I do, with the mindset of I want to fit into what narrative this person's trying to tell, instead of saying, hey, I'm gonna bring some kooky off the wall character and it's up to him to
Right.
decide, or excuse me, them, the GM, to decide how they're gonna fit my wacky character into all this. Especially if it's like a newer GM who might not be comfortable putting out like a banned foci list or something like that. If you come at them with a weird character that might not fully fit in, you might make them feel uncomfortable in certain kind of ways for having invited you to begin with.
All I can say is this, Anthony. I want to play an android
Yeah.
in your horror game.
First, I'm gonna say this. We'll touch that on the GM side, but you absolutely need a banned foci list to run modern games. So you shouldn't feel bad if you're picking something that you know um, doesn't make sense. Quite frankly, me personally, I was looking for like like the discussion leaning towards more the mechanical side, how to help a GM, and personally, I think in modern games, normally when you design a cipher character, people tend to rely on the foci, right? Because the foci is what gives you the cool abilities. But I think with a modern game, you could actually reverse it a little bit and rely more on the type and the descriptor. You know, it to encourage, because you're not gonna have this extensive list of foci to choose from. You're most likely gonna pick a profession to base your character on. So then, in order to to add the little embellishments to make your character different, it's going to be the descriptor that's really going to enhance your character. So lean in on the clever or the young, and that's ways in a modern game that you could really, using the mechanics of character creation, you could really help your GM out. Like you showing them, well, somebody's gonna play the stoic, defender police officer. So I'm gonna play the shy librarian. You know what I mean? To make the characters different. Oh, I will also advise that maybe you stray away from adept, because a lot of the adept abilities are going to be too fantastical for the game you're trying to run.
Unless there is a slight way around it, but I would only suggest this to more experienced GMs, where you take those abilities, like for example, um, a data has the ability scan, turn scan into. Oh, wait a minute, we're talking from GM side. Stop,
Yeah.
stop. We'll save that till like next time. I was getting ready to go GM on you, but you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, but as a player, your job, first and foremost is always to have fun. But you also want to make it as easy for your GM as possible to tell the story you're trying to tell together. So, just those little things, the little things of recognizing what the setting is and recognizing what's actually happening or what your character is actually capable of accomplishing within the setting goes a long way. So when we're building out, it could be modern day, like if you're building out, you want to use adept, then try to make it make sense. Come up with the creative, IT guy, computer hacker, you know what I mean, or something like that, and use the flavors to enhance your characters that way.
So, Brilliant Loser slash Jesus brought up an excellent point, kind of. He just says scan is my Sherlock Holmes power, though. So how Sherlock Holmes has
Right.
that certain ability. So you can still play like an adept, right? As long as you can flavor whatever those abilities are to still fit within the setting that's
What I was
being
getting ready to
played.
go into.
Yeah, I mean, you can still do that as a player as long as again, if the GM straight up says you can't play an adept, then don't touch the adept. But if they're allowing you to play as adept, definitely try to flavor the abilities you're choosing to fit within the setting at hand, because again, it is possible.
Yeah, I mean, what's the one that you could jump long distances?
Our step.
Far
Far
step,
step.
right? Far step is kind of out of the realm of modern science, unless you have rocket boots or some random thing, a pogo stick. You might have to use actual equipment to justify having those abilities. And since we're using modern physics, right, you can't perform those abilities without that equipment. You know what I mean? So, or you could perform those abilities only with two hands on a pogo stick. Having these negatives, which kind of is going to lessen the abilities a little, but you'll still be capable of doing them.
Well, like we were saying, since we started talking about it, I mean, there's all sorts of ways. Because like Ward, I thought how Ward would work would be, you'd always prep yourself. Oh, look, there's a door, or there's a table I can flip over. That way, he's got, something to give him that armor, that defense. So, like you said, just being able to flavor it, flip it around.
I mean,
You know.
that's a great point, Dean. You can use those abilities, but you're going to have to have a narrative description prior
Right.
to using those abilities. And you have to recognize as a player that the GM might not allow you to use those abilities until you give a narrative description of why it makes sense to use them.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's what I've been doing with people as players, trying to get them to use to that, giving them that narrative ability to tell me what's going on in a scene, and I've done it like that with, like I said, many modern games, because you didn't have, somebody being able to, like Onslaught, the favorite ability, that adepts use. Well, what do you got? Do you have a gun? You got a zip gun? You got a slingshot? You got to have something, and then narratively to make it work. So.
And also too, I know I kind of sound like I'm shitting on adept for modern games, but I think it's the actual reverse with speaker. These are the games where the speaker shines.
Exactly.
Like speaker might not be the greatest, the greatest type to pick, in other genres and settings, but in a modern game, speakers, they do it all. They're the jack of all trades.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and what you call it, speakers, like, again, they almost struggle to do well in most other kinds of games. Like, people look at speakers and they're like, Again, I know people who enjoy the speaker quite a lot, but I feel like it's one of the more underplayed ones in like a fantastical setting or like something that has over the top stuff. But you're right, they've really shine heavily in these modern games because just talking to people is a pretty easy thing to relay in a modern game.
Well, I'll tell
Um,
you, I'm sorry about that, Al. But
no, I was done.
no, I was saying, but that's just it. People don't realize the power of a speaker. And we talk about more fantastical things. I told you, I turned a speaker into Captain America. And he was like the most kick-ass character in the game. And he was doing everything Cap did. But it's all in the way you handle it. So but a modern game, yeah, speaker can be a deadly tool.
Something real quick. Tech Flub just wrote, I ran a World War II Nazi hunting one shot. 6 of the 7 players were speakers, and they loved it. First off, that's awesome. And second of all, why wasn't I invited to that game? Because that's right up my alley.
Well, number three,
I'll be all over, a Nazi hunting
like I
one shot.
said, hey, all we got to say to Tech Club is when you run it for us, we'll stream it.
But yeah, speakers are perfect, and not only are they perfect, they cover all the like tropes that you would get in a modern game. You could have the speaker doctor, you could have the speaker police officer, politician, gambler, homebody. You could have the speaker pretty much in any style of character, and it's going to work well in a modern game.
I mean, it was kind of funny when you look at a modern game. Every class has, as long as you think about how you're doing it, every class has the opportunity to shine. I mean, you look at a warrior, the way the warrior is built out, that's the perfect street fighter. That's the perfect, bouncer, just, the gentle giant who knows how to fight. You look at the explorer is, that's the intrepid reporter. That's the con man. That's the fast talker on the street. I mean, the whole gamut. And then you look, like you said, you got your speaker, and then your adept can be all sorts of interesting doctors and stuff. It just.
So that's a good question. I'll ask you, and we'll ask the chat. When you're playing in a modern game and you're getting ready to, design your character, do you do profession? Like, do you come up with a job, like? Or do you design, like I'm gonna play a funny, witty character? Or me personally, I usually try to, like, I guess my go-to is to pick a profession because it's probably the easiest. Like I'm saying, hey, I'm playing a doctor or I'm playing a dog walker, and then try to imagine what those, professions, what kind of personality would fit that profession type. But I want to know is that's how everyone else does it, or what's what's the common way of developing a character for a modern game?
Honestly, that's pretty much how I do it too. Like, depending on what story is being told or whatever have you, I think to myself, hey, who would or what kind of person would fit into this story? And I think of that first, like whether it be a policeman or like, a stoner teenager or whatever have you, whatever character. I think of the character first before I even look at any like foci or descriptors or anything like that. And then you go into the mechanics aspect of it and figure out how to best make that character shine with the descriptor foci type etc.
And I think with me, my biggest thing is that I always I try to just delve into the mental aspect of the person, the character that it's going to be, and let it blossom from there. So it's kind of like, what type of, this guy A personality type, B personality type, is he aggressive? Is he tenacious? And so on and so forth, all those aspects. And from there, the profession blossoms, the image of the character blossoms, everything just kind of comes together.
Oh, that's interesting. Both of you guys pick personality first, which is cool. It's interesting.
So what Eric said,
okay.
No, I was just saying, reading just what the chat is saying. Eric is saying that I come up with a concept with background bullet points, then build around that, which essentially sounds like a similar thing. Yeah.
Yeah, Dean said that earlier too. Same thing. What Eric said is, I think a background in a modern game is very important. Not only to provide the GM with extra information, but it's also important for you as a player because you don't have the crutch of abilities to rely on, so your backstory becomes a lot more important in the first few sessions of the games to give you motivation to what your character is actually doing. So it's probably a little more important than it is normally, in a normal Numenera game or Gods of the Fall game or God Forsaken, whatever you choose to play.
And Eric made a good point just now. He said also connections. You have to be connected to other people to make the story. And
Yes.
100% that is like it's okay to have like if you don't know what other characters are being played or whatever, to not be connected to the other player characters or whatever have you. But create a story, a connection, like just make up an NPC you're related to in the story, in the setting, like your mother, your guardian, your mentor, and that gives the GM more fodder to play with when it comes time to build his story or build the story.
Yeah.
And if you do happen to know what the other player characters are, and the GM's giving you guys an opportunity to make your connection together, definitely don't shy away from that.
Yeah. I'm gonna say
Here,
that first.
hold on, before you, because you might want to add to this, because this is something that I try and it works wonders. Sometimes I will try to talk to each player if I get the opportunity to talk to them about their backgrounds, and then weave the connections, you know, to the other characters that way,
You,
because that really gives you, stuff to play with and the players.
you see what I was gonna say from a player perspective, since we're talking on the player side, the player connections that are in the Numenera book, the Cypher Core book, are one of the most underutilized mechanics from the player side of the table. As someone who runs a lot of games on the CU, I noticed that you most of the time you have to force players to do their connections, and it actually helps you as a player. It helps flesh out your character. It gives you, like, the first session, it actually gives you motivation to build
To
on
work
the
together.
narrative with the yeah, to work together. And I noticed that most of the times, like they'll people will create their characters. They'll have everything done, ciphers, abilities, everything. But when you ask about connections, no one has a not even an inkling of a motivation to want to do connections. And I don't think they realize how beneficial it is to you as a player to actually do the connections with the other players.
Big facts. And what again, not only is it super helpful to the GM, like Anthony was saying, but like Jesus is saying, it's fun. Like if
Yeah.
you haven't really given it a thought to try to make connections with the other players, definitely go for it next time. Because sitting down and figuring out how you guys are connected or why you guys are working towards the same objective, it can be really fun. It can be really immersive as well. Like you get more into your character and into their own goals and whatever
I was
have
I was
yous.
gonna say I was gonna say just that out that it's all about having, some reason to share the goal of the story, some reason to traverse that obstacle together, whatever it might be. It's crazy. We're talking about modern games. I was just watching a movie with my wife because I had forgot that we were supposed to record tonight. That's really bad. It was Veterans Day. I was having a good time. I sure did.
Oh,
Forgot.
oh, speaking of which, I know we didn't say this earlier, but thank you to the service to anyone that's served in any of the armed forces and military. That includes you, Dean. Thank you for your
Like I
service.
said, salute
Sorry, I
all
didn't
my
say that at
people.
the beginning. Yeah.
you know. But we just watching this movie. It's called The Impossible, and this family of five all got separated. It'd be a great disaster game to run, and they're all trying to get back to each other. And it was, even with that, think about that. Give them double descriptors, and that would be cool because that would give you that extra idea. So to see these
G-
connections.
Dean, you just want to go into the GM section, so let's just go into the GM section.
No, 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 no. I'm saying the connections portion.
Yo, I would hate to have Dean as my SAT teacher because he'll have you all over the place. We'll be doing, we're doing math now. 5 seconds later, we're doing English. All right, Dean, set it off on GM.
All right. Well, GM facing, on the same topic, I would offer like double descriptors, you know, Because just think if you were a, you know, rugged, resilient explorer, or uh, a clever, funny, or funny, clever guy or something. It would be kind of cool to have.
I mean, but like first, how do you? Let's start from the very beginning, though. Like, if you designing a modern game, what's the first steps before you get into, like you sit down. I'm a modern game. Like, what's
Well,
the
then I got to
first?
figure out what period, because modern, like we said, encompasses a pretty broad spectrum of time. So that would be first. The second thing would be, what is the conflict? What is the story? What's the motivating ideology of the story? Is it gangsters? Is it disaster? Is it adventure down the Congo? Whatever. Is it murder on Orient Express? That then from there it's like, so what foci am going to allow the game? What or what resource material do I need to pull information from? You know, and then you decide to what level. It's going to be modern, but how modern? How far are we going to let you push it? Are we going to give you the MacGyver explanations, or are we going to try to really break it down into hard lines? And I think from there, and that's where you start thinking about what type of characters you want in the game. I think character creation, if it's especially if it's going to be something long term, should be a conversation between the GM and the players. And let the players shape these ideas, these characters, and then the GM can start fleshing out how he's going to plug them in. And that's what I was saying about the dual conversation about connections, because you could layer the connections if you wanted to. Just get a picture of this character, and then you get a picture of that character, and just say Anthony's character, learned baking from, a master baker, but he never knew the guy's name. The guy did it because he was a homeless kid or something. Well, you find out that on the streets, this baker is doing what he's doing because he's looking for his lost nephew, and Anthony's character knows the nephew, but doesn't, so there's their connection. Stuff like that you could play with, build layers into your story.
And for me, is like the way I approach a modern game. It's the first thing I think of is what you call it. It depends on if I'm playing with random players that I've never played with before, or if I'm playing with people I know. If I'm playing with people I know and can trust, I can trust them to make their characters without any issues. So I don't have to worry about making a focus list or anything like that. Whereas if I'm playing with randoms, one of the first things I'm going to do is say, hey, here's a list of pregens, or hey, if you want to make your own character, here's the list of approved foci. Because again, some players might say, hey, I'm going to make my own character, and might make things uncomfortable for you depending on what kind of character they're coming back with. So again, if you're playing with new people or people you've never played with before, one of my first things that I do is think about what I don't want to see in the game as far as foci and maybe descriptors go, because some of them can be fantastical as well. Very few of them, but either way, after that, it's like again, and if I'm playing with people I know and can trust, they'll make a character that'll fit. And if they do something a little wacky or something, I know I can trust them to have a good explanation as to why, they're doing that sort of character. So it becomes less of a what is a stress point for me when playing a modern game. After that, something I look at, or again, obviously one of the first things, even before all this, is figuring out what kind of game you're playing, like spies or you know, street gangs or whatever have you. That's aside from point. That's like the first step to playing any game, literally. So after that, you know what kind of characters you want to see in your game. You know what kind of game you're playing. Me as a GM, something I like to build up or get ready is a list of ciphers or assets. If we have the asset deck on hand or whatever have you. Separate some that are good for this modern game that you're playing, because not all ciphers will work in this modern game.
Yeah,
Not all.
I was gonna bring that up as well. Like, first of all, you shouldn't be using the cipher deck. Period. You,
No.
I mean, you need to use the subtle cipher deck or the asset deck, because if you want them to roll randomly, which is the easiest way to do it in Cypher System, you know, if you have the regular Cypher deck, it's just going to create all sorts of problems. Like someone's going to draw a card, and 3 out of the 4 things are going to be unusable for them to pick from. So, you know, to eliminate that issue, you know, is just use the asset deck or use the subtle Cypher deck, because you know that all those, you know, all the cards are going to be usable. So, like that would have been like my first point. You know, I was going to definitely bring that up. Like it's okay. Like I know we're in the age of yes but it's okay as a GM to say no every once in a while. And some of the things, you know, just because something is printed doesn't mean you need to have everything that's used. And you know, if you're trying to tell a particular story, you need to use everything that's in your toolbox. You know, you don't have to open up your entire MCG collection for every game. You know. But
Right.
like to go with what you're saying is I'm gonna start off with, I'm gonna figure out my genre, I'm gonna figure out like my era, right? And a point I wanted to stress was in modern games or even in period pieces, you don't have to make as much shit up because you have a wealth of knowledge on the internet of shit that actually happened. You know,
Right.
if you're dealing in the modern era, you can research. You want to do a plague or outbreak type game, you know, you a Google step away from having a million different diseases that you can use. You know what I
And you
mean?
got a million different you got a million
Yeah.
different movies to reference it. I mean,
Yeah.
Outbreak is a great one. You know,
Yeah.
Outbreak
You don't even
Monkey,
have to use movies. You could just use newspaper clips.
new, and yeah, and news stories, all that.
There's just so many resources you can end up using for these kind of things.
Yeah, and the
Um,
other thing I was just gonna add was that I'm gonna have a preset list of foci. It might not be all from the same book. You could use some of the Numenera foci, but you have to eliminate those foci that's just not gonna make sense.
Right.
Right? So you know, you give them a list of 40 or 50 different foci to pick from, and be like, please pick from this group. Or if you wanna use something that's not in this group, give a reasonable explanation why it will work in this setting. Like in modern games, you definitely need that session zero conversation because you guys have to be clear with each other or what kind of story you want to tell together.
Exactly.
Most definitely. I really don't plan much more than that when I get my modern games planning, right? So like I'll get my focus list, you know, if it's new players or, you know, players I haven't played with. I'll get my ciphers ready. And then it's just normal game planning, just, you know, figure out who the big bad is, figure out what the story is, what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to think of any other specific things I do just for modern.
I'll ask you all this in the chat question then. Does your difficult ratings change your mindset on target numbers when you're running a modern game opposed to Numenera or opposed to Gods of the Fall? Or
Absolutely. Mine do.
Not
how
me.
so? Like, would care to elaborate?
Well, I would say mine. They change in the sense of uh, how I'm going to set them. I mean, an example would be if I'm running, you know, something fantastical, you know, stopping the carriage would be probably a lower difficulty in the sense that these people have, you know, additional tools, you know, that they could use towards it, you know, magic, whatever, you know, the way they would, you know, stick a spoke in the tire, you know, and a carriage to stop it. Whereas in a more modern game, that difficulty might be a step harder because guess what? You got to stop a car, you know. So I have to, you know, put them in that lens and look at them in a focal point kind of idea, how people are going to deal with it. You know, wouldn't really make sense for me to say it's a same difficulty when, you know, you got a person who's going to try to put their shoulder into a car versus a guy that's going to stick a plank through a spoke. So that kind of stuff.
You know, what is it? Sorry if I'm butchering your name here. Kresrick?
Yeah, I was gonna say we
Yeah.
should touch that
Yeah,
topic. Read it.
I'll touch it. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
he said, or they said, one issue I've always had with trying more non-cinematic games in Cypher is getting the damage to feel right. You almost have to make all firearms also lower a step on damage track to make them feel like the threat of an actual gun. Otherwise, PCs need to get shot several times before they feel it. So that is definitely, it can be an issue, yes. And that's touched upon, I believe, in Vert, where they actually just straight up change the damage values.
Oh, I was going to suggest something else. Like when we ran uh, Cowboys versus Aliens, before the aliens came, if someone shot someone with a rifle, I didn't do damage. I just knocked them down the damage track.
And
You know,
yeah,
because it should feel, it's the, it's the early stages of the Wild West. 9 out of 10 times when someone got shot, they were either dying then or dying from gangrene, a couple of
Dying
days
later.
right? So you have to make it seem impactful, so you can make those little adjustments. It might not be in the book, but I know this happens all the time on the server. But Cypher System is rulings over rules. That's just the basis of the game. You have to make it make sense for your game. So yeah, like I 100% agree with him. The way the current structure is, when you're running a modern game, reality, the way the damage works might not fit reality. Like say we were running a samurai game. You ever seen it? Remember the old samurai movies? Those guys would slice somebody once and they were toast. If we were doing Cypher System, that's only a fourth of my pool.
a six if it's like a super long katana.
And here's like two ways to, but there's another way to deal with that too, or mindset to take when you're trying to explain it. With those things, two things, like we were talking about guys with guns. Flip it. You could always flip it on his ear if you wanted to keep the damage structure the same. And basically, what you're saying is every time the guy shoots at you, you know what, you're really not getting hit. It's really not the bullet hitting you, unless he rolls a 19 or a 20.
Yeah, but how many times can you use that in the narrative before it gets stale?
Like the bullet grazed you, the sword
No, it
would
take a long time. It would, to whittle somebody down. Them 2 points, 2 points, 2 points. But it's basically them just becoming more tired, more careless, whatever. You can explain it away that way. So there's like double ways to do it. The other thing is, like Anthony said, make them drop down the damage track, make healing way more difficult. Okay, so yeah, when like any movie, especially if you're doing it for a one shot, it's like a movie or episode. At the beginning, the guy is like uber, but by the end of the movie, like John McClane at the end of Die Hard, he's all taped up, bloody, his feet are all cut up. He's taking damage over the course of the movie. He couldn't hit. All he was able to do was take his instant in 10-minute recovery. But by the time he gets to the 1 hour and the 10 hour, that's no longer available. And he's wherever he's at,
Just to piggyback off that, I forget the exact specifics of, I forget if they're in the revised book or not, about lasting damage. That's definitely something you want to try to incorporate into modern games, where if someone's getting shotgun blast and they're getting knocked down a track, they're going to have some sort of lasting damage from that once they recover.
Right.
And I forget the specifics of how it's detailed in the book. But you might want to try to, work around or make something up to make that lasting damage feel, if you get shot, in Anthony's Cowboys and Indians game, it was a one-shot, so we didn't really have to deal too much with lasting damage. But if you're playing like a campaign setting or, a multiple session thing, lasting damage can really add to the narrative of pushing home that, hey, the stuff you're doing is dangerous.
Like I said, it's one of the... I think that's one of my biggest issues when we talk about, other type of games like, fantasy games or whatever. And, wizards just get all their spells back after they've pumped all this power out. It drives you for. So I love the idea of lasting damage. It's going to take time, or you may never heal. If you really want to if you were playing something raw and gritty, You get a wound, or you take too much of your or one of your pools, you get lasting damage from
I
it.
mean,
And
and
you
it made me think of another point as well. When you're dealing with modern games from the GM perspective, there there's has to be some sort of impossible tasks, because no matter how hard you try, if you have a butter knife, you're not harming a tank. You know what I mean? Like it's just physically impossible. So even if somebody rolls off, and gets a natural 20 and gets a GMI, you, there has to be a point where it you can't bend the laws of reality in a modern game like you can in other genres and settings.
I mean,
If that makes any
so, I'm
sense.
sorry. I think of it as, just my creative brain just went firing because you said butter knife attacking a tank and rolling a 20. But like, what if again your super creative player is like, I go to a run at this tank with my butter knife and he rolls a 20. I throw it into that little like slit they have. It hits the driver in the face. Like, I don't know. Don't most tanks have like a little like
it's
I don't know. Maybe older tanks. I don't know.
You know what's funny? Al's always that guy that does ask those crazy random things.
I mean, you don't know if you don't ask, right? Like I don't know in real life if tanks have a little, but I've seen it in media that they have these little like.
But you do know that they have a bulletproof. That
Oh, there's a
slip
glass.
has a
Glass.
bulletproof glass.
I did
It's
not know
an
that.
open slot.
See, I don't. I lack this knowledge.
Yeah.
but in Al's game,
That butter knife would went through so fast.
and it was like at the perfect angle, so the speed of the tank caused it to whip, and kind of vortex around.
I'm the kind of GM who would allow it. Yes, I'll say it here, loud and proud.
and like everything we're saying, if you are making rules adjustments, you have to bring this up with your players before session, either before the game or at session 0, so they aren't caught off guard. Like with any advice, with any house rulings, the right thing to do is to let them know that, hey, I'm running it this way.
For sure.
Jason C said bulletproof, but is it butter knife?
That's our next T-shirt. Is it butter knife proof?
Write that down now.
Now I want to play a waiter that's really an assassin that only uses butter knives.
No, I feel like all y'all are. If you're ever playing my games, your characters are always just gonna have a butter knife on them. And like I take out my butter knife. Like any problem that comes up, here's the butter knife.
Al, you the shirt guy. Write that down. We need to get a design. That shirt needs to go out. I need to buy that for you.
So, what are some of the other things you guys do with when designing a modern game? Like, what's the focus? Like, do you have a session 0 or lay down your guidelines to your players?
If I'm going to run multiple sessions, I definitely want to have a session 0. If it's a one shot, you know me. I always try to give a sentence or two background blurb on the world itself and on the characters to have some kind of connections, because that, like we said, it's really important to have that. But if it's if it's everybody's making their own characters and all of that, then yeah, we're gonna have to have a little bit of a session 0. Definitely if it's a campaign or multiple session, and not so much as a one shot.
What I do is it's like you guys. I mean, you guys know I don't normally run campaigns or whatever have you. But if it's just a one shot, I try to detail a mini session 0 just within my looking for game posts. If it's like, trying to find new players, I detail what I'm looking for, if anything's focuses or banned or whatever have you. And I tell them, hey, reach out to me if any of this is unclear. Like, if you need more specifications, we can talk about it. And again, I do enjoy having a session 0. It's a little harder to do it for a one shot. So what I normally do is I'll have a 10 minutes like before my game starts, and we'll talk about, hey, your characters look fine, or if something comes up before then, I would obviously bring it up before this little one. Session 0. But once we're having the actual game, I'll sit down and say, hey, these are my expectations. These are like lines we might cross or whatever have you. Like if you have any X card like things, now's the time to mention it before we actually start playing. And even again, you don't have to have a full on like 30, 40 minute session 0 to try to get expectations. Sometimes even 5 or 10 minutes is more than enough right before your game to kind of set expectations.
Kazrak brought up another great point, something that I stumble across this problem a lot of times because I tend to try to do period pieces. But like it's good to give a if you basing it in an era or a period of time, it's good to give a little excerpt of what was actually happening in that time period at that moment. So before, even when I tend to try to put it in my my pitch, my game pitch for players, like to let them know like this is what's happening. But like Brilliant Loser joked about it when when I was running Burning a Red Lotus Temple, and he wanted to make a sumo, and I was like, well, there's no sumos in ancient China. You know what I mean? Like we had that discussion. Like we can have a sumo in when we're playing ancient China, like an ancient China setting. It's good to give a little description of, hey, this is the era, this is what's available to you, this is the events that are happening at this moment in this time period. To one, it helps the players flesh out their character if you do it beforehand, and two, it what you call it, it puts everyone on the same page.
Yeah, most definitely. And it's super important to have that be on the same page, because I've heard many stories from you, Anthony, where players were not.
I want to play a robot. I mean, an android.
Time traveler.
I want to play.
That's my go-to.
If we're playing a modern day zombie game. Very realistic. Not the fact that there's a bunch of zombies, but hey, we're not robots and androids.
Oh, hey Bob. Hey Bob. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. That he's a regular for my normal stream.
Hey Bob.
Bob. It's been so long, Bob.
He's a good guy. He's a good guy.
I believe you. He's a very good guy. Good looking, handsome.
So we talked about. Oh no, I wasn't I was more putting the blame on me, Loser, as in not properly explaining it.
Oh yeah, definitely. What you call it? That's a big part of the reason. I try to include detailed story description or something. Am I looking for group post or when I'm trying to talk to my friends about what the game is? I'd say, hey,
or even if you running a one shot, or even if you're running a campaign and you're starting to build up in time, you could explain to them like by the fourth or fifth session, hey, this happened in this time in history. You know what I mean? So now we're going to start touching on actual events that happen and your character's involvement in those events. So you give them a little refresher of, a little history refresher. You can also give them references of what to look up so they have a better idea. Like that falls more on, it falls more on the GM, really, to be honest with you, to explain that out.
Yeah, and I think Kezarek said that earlier. Was that?
Yeah, that's what started this whole conversation.
Yeah, no, I'm saying I know he said something else too. He said, "See, you made me lose my train of thought. Don't get old people. But your buddy to mess with you."
Either way, it is awesome to what you call it. If you're a very dedicated GM, like I know Anthony would probably provide something like this in his Roll20, you should have, or not even Roll20, like maybe even a Google Doc or something, where you have a list of like important events that have happened around the same time, just broken up like little, maybe 4-5 sentence paragraphs, like, hey, this is an event that happened at around the same time, and even include like research points for them to look up, like, hey, look up this event or this person or so on and so forth, to get a better idea of what's going on around that time.
And another thing that Anthony does, you got to give him credit, pictures. If you put, so even if you're playing at home at a table, print up pictures, put them on little things around the room, just to set the atmosphere so people are getting that mindset, that moment. Visual aids always help.
I'm going to touch on two more topics I think are probably important in modern games. One that we haven't really touched on is technology. Like every area that you work on has a different level of technology. If we work in, in 2020, you have to be prepared as a GM to know that characters would have, and it would make sense for characters to have smartphones. It would make sense for most areas to have Wi-Fi. So compute, a mobile, a laptop is extremely handy. So
Google
when
search, because right in the game,
yeah,
Google search, you know.
I take out my phone and Google it.
You don't know how many times as a player I've seen a person's GM's month-long mystery campaign solved with one character saying, "Hey, I'm gonna Google search this."
Yeah. You
And if
laugh, but it's so true. I've seen it. It's so.
and if you play it online, you hear that awkward pause for like 10 seconds of the GM's brain. The gears are thinking, what am I going to do now?
Your battery's dead. You don't have a charger.
GM intrusion. Your phone has no service.
You're in the gym at no service.
Yeah.
You're in the
can't
service
look
dead
it up.
zone. And then then by like later on, as you have time to think about it, oh well, see what happened was a plane crashed into the main tower, caused electromagnetic. You just got fantastic.
Oh,
And it's the same thing with access to transportation. Like
Uber.
in other games, you can make the trek from point A to point B in an entire session. In a modern game, that could be 15 minutes. Hey, I'm calling the Uber and I'm booking it. We're getting here. You know what I mean? So you have to take all those things into account when designing, or at least figuring out a way to explain or make it more difficult. If that's what you want that to be the heart of your narrative.
I mean, there's definitely lots of ways to explain away in a modern game why a fast mode of transportation might not be available. Like, oh, the lift is going to be here in 45 minutes. Oh, the bus has stopped running. Oh, whatever have you. But you definitely do have to take that into consideration, yes.
But the same way that I said at the very beginning of this stream that it has to make sense in the narrative for the player when they're designing the characters, it's a dick move for the GM to make senseless, like it's 12 o'clock in the afternoon and the buses are not running.
No,
It's
for
a dick
sure.
move.
It has to make sense, obviously. Like, don't do anything like that, for sure.
But no, but he's got a point.
What you call it? When you said, when you were building up to like don't be a dick move, what I thought you were leaning towards was like don't take someone who drives like a maniac and take away their car, like
yeah, which is another one. Yeah,
you can't use your vehicle anymore. It's actually a tricycle.
And the last thing with technology I was going to bring up is access to equipment. Especially if you're playing in a city, a modern era, and characters are accumulating wealth or accumulating money, they're going to want to spend that money. And they're going to want to spend that money to upgrade stuff. Like if you have a character that has a gun, he's going to want to buy a better gun. You have a character that's a hacker, he's going to want to buy, and you have to take all that into account.
Just be prepared. Yeah,
I mean,
prepare your game accordingly.
And it's pretty easy to do that because, again, depending on what type of game or setting you're running, what time period, you can just Google it and then make up the equipment list as you go, like what they upgrade to, what the upgrades do. Cypher makes it super easy to just look at a certain item or let's say object and just stat it out. I mean, it's a little
or
more
you could
work.
you could have also lived through at least 3 eras of change. You're still be here to tell these stories because
There's that too.
I don't need to Google the 70s, 80s, or 90s. I don't need to Google any of those.
Well, all I gotta say is that Dean's phone had a little thing that you held to your ear.
Listen.
I had that like a little.
No, listen. It wasn't that far back, but it was far enough back to go. You had one phone in the house.
Yeah.
And it had a long cord that your mama could walk all through the house.
Yes. And I'm old enough to remember rotary phones.
Oh my God!
But you know how I do a workaround? I do this a lot, which is sort of becoming my go-to. I like to set games in the early 80s or 70s because it was before the real IT boom. So you could eliminate a lot of the problems. Like there's still phones exist, but people have beepers instead of cell phones,
But
right?
yeah, that's only if you're talking about the 80s, because the 70s, if you had a beeper, you was a doctor. you know. So
But yeah, I think this has been a good talk.
I have one last.
wait a minute, brilliant loser. He said I was once very confused in the game because the phone being used made the internet work.
Oh, made the internet
Not
not
one.
work.
Yeah,
Oh, you don't know about dial-up, bro?
yeah,
And you don't know what are you? Is that a serious question? What's a rotary phone,
yeah.
bruh?
Yo, you remember I don't want to do it because it's annoying to the ears, but you remember the AOL sound when you
Yes.
were logging in?
Like the meme you see about that is, do you remember back? Well, excuse me, it's like an old person in the picture. It's like back in my day, you used to have to murder a robot to get on the internet.
Yeah.
And it's like whatever you say, Grandpa.
All right, so here's my. I have just like two quick. One last question, then we'll move on to.
Oh, wait. Just in case Jesus was serious about that question. Rotary phone is the kind of phone with the circled dial pad that you have to like. I'm sure you've seen it in like old school media. I don't know. I feel like
Oh,
rotary,
CompuServe. I remember CompuServe too.
but that is what a rotary phone is. The kind with the big old circle pad that you have to like spin the number and then it like goes back. Yeah, we had one of those when I was growing
All
up.
right, so my first question is, do you, and this is for Chad as well, do you think modern games make great campaigns?
I think it depends. I think some things can be great campaigns. Like um, I did like a post-apocalyptic game, one time where it was, just after the here and now, and people had to get from one place in the country to another place, but they had to do it all on foot. So something like that, if it's going to be that you can, tell the type of story that could be episodic, I think it could make a good campaign.
I mean, it also depends on how long you're trying to make this campaign, right? Or tell the story. You can even again watch your character's age by going decade from decade. You start in the '70s, you go into '80s, '90s, etc. Depending again what kind of game or you're trying to tell. But what you call it, even within each decade, each year, like culture changes, not a lot, but like there's distinct things between like the 71, 72 again, I don't know any, but you can easily look these things up, like what was popular during that year, or those specific years, and you can still again have that progression of a campaign because there's future to that history. You can look it up and see again what was popping or popular around the years as the game progresses in story time.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I've never done this, but I always wanted to start a game in like the 50s or 60s and have it end in the 80s or 90s because there's so much history that you could have the characters not maybe directly related to, but living through the Vietnam War, living through the fashion, the hippie clothes, the birth of punk rock, heavy metal, the birth of rap music. Like there's so much stuff, not only music and entertainment, but in history, the Berlin Wall coming down and having the characters experience that in gameplay, I was always fascinating to me. I never got to do it. Maybe one day I will, but I think that a modern game like that will be an awesome campaign.
Yeah, we already got someone saying sign you up, Jason. Sign him up, I should say.
Yeah.
uh,
And I guess the last thing I would ask, from just modern games, and this is what we're here for with Cypher Unlimited, is how do you think Cypher System itself, the core rules, handles modern games? What does it do well? What it doesn't do well? And like always, the chat is free to give us some ideas on this topic as well.
Well, you can call me a fanboy. I'm just gonna say it. Yes, it handles them very well, in my opinion, and that's because I think I look at
You
Cypher
saw what,
modularly.
you saw what Eric wrote?
What are you
Oh,
right?
I heard truth. Yeah, tell me. I get it. But you know, it does. It handles them well. You just have to make the adjustments. You have to remember the modular nature of Cypher. And if you remember that, you can make those disparages work out. Like we were talking about with damage, bullets put you down. If you get shot, you're going down a damage track. You get cut, you're going to take, twice as much damage. You get punched, it's going to be normal. Stuff like that, just gotta kind of think it through.
So I also agree that it can run or it handles modern very well. Especially if you decide to homebrew and do some tweaks to like the damage or damage track with the lethality of like, big firearms or something like that. I think what it really boils down to, why I think it handles modern very well, is because of the resource management aspect of it, right? So it translates extremely well to a person's like well-being in real life. Like the more you do things, the more tired you get. That is represented by your pools going down and you having to manage how you do things or how you expend your effort. And I feel like that is super immersive for a modern game, because in these stressful situations, a person might be thinking, "Hey, do I want to run for it when there's depending on their speed, or do I want to try to outwit the enemy depending on what their intellect is like?" And that again correlates really well to real life. Whether you might be physically exhausted or mentally exhausted, you might decide to do things differently in real life depending on where your reserves are, and that translates super duper well with the Cypher system and its resource management core.
I neither one of your guys gave me a negative, so I'll give you a minute to think about that.
I thought
But
we were doing negatives
Oh
afterwards.
wait,
all
yeah,
right, so I, I absolutely agree with both of you. It absolutely handles modern well. I think that the biggest component of why it handles modern well is the actual character sentence in itself. You know, um, when you separate personality from job to abilities, the way the character sentence is structured, it's very easy. It allows you to build diverse and multiple style of characters, and that's what you need in a modern setting. You need to be able to have diversity amongst characters, and the character sentence allows you to do that. I also think that the GMI mechanic and the player intrusion mechanic is kind of tailor made for modern games, because you the GM could steer the narrative back to reality with a GMI, with the GMI mechanic, which is very helpful. So I absolutely think it handles modern, and I think first responders is going to make it take it over the top. I mean, it's already my go-to system, but it's going to make it's going to take it into the GURPS level of being able to do pretty much anything, or at least that's what my anticipation for the book is,
Right.
because it's going to actually explain all the professions to you and the way to do it. So I absolutely think it handles it. What it doesn't handle well, which is important, is because I think at its core, Cypher System was designed with Numenera, was Numenera as the main focus, is is like what we touched on earlier. Damage and death is very hard to come by without GM adjustments. And I know that we could adjust it ourselves, but inherently in the core rules, if we're being real, like you can't, your response can't be, I could homebrew this as a response to argue away the fact that it's
It doesn't
hard
do it
it's
doesn't do
hard to
something.
yeah, it's hard to kill somebody. Even though we all homebrew everything, that can't be the go-to response for everyone, because someone that doesn't have gaming experience that way isn't going to view it as, I'm gonna be quick to homebrew something.
yeah.
So that's the one issue, that the characters are a little more survive. I mean, the survivability is a little higher than expected for most modern games.
Yeah, and what Eric said, both things he just said right now make a lot of sense. That rules should be added for something like this, where for what you call it, so players can understand more inherently. But again, even if rules aren't added, I don't know if he's talking about the book or whatever have you, the
Yeah.
GM can still write a little homebrew packet that they can give to their players. Hey, this is how we're doing damage or whatever have you, so they understand the risk in the scenarios or whatever have you. But it is one of the bigger downsides, the money aspect, how they handle cash money. The way Cypher does money, I'm not sure if there's any different versions of it and iterations of the books. I think they're all dealt in generalities. I think that's an okay way to do things in a campaign, but then you have to kind of forego that. I forget what the different tiers are called, like not expensive, whatever, exorbitant, whatever. When you start keeping track of the player's money, because you can't say they have an exorbitant amount of whatever, right? So depending the way I like to do it in my home game when it comes to currencies, is I take how there are the tiers like whatever. Again, I'm blanking on what exactly they are in the book. So when they start collecting money or gold or whatever have you, you break it down into what makes sense for the setting. So like if a not expensive item is like $20 or whatever have you, you should, or excuse me, to make things easier, I would definitely only do in certain increments, like $50 or $20 increments, just bing bang boom. But either way, like an inexpensive item would be like $20, an exorbitant item would be like $200 or whatever have you, 10 times more, and you keep track of that in the same way that they keep track of the generalities. It's just you're now naming the generalities with this increment that you've made up, whether it be 20 or 50 or whatever have you, and the players start collecting, the general whatever. I'm struggling on how to best describe what I'm doing with
Well,
this.
it's like you're saying, Al. I mean, I think I get what you're saying, and you could really make it easy on yourself and just figure those out using because the resources are there. You hop online, Google, average salary. Google what was considered the richest man in the world at that year, and all that kind of stuff. How much money was he worth? You do that, you have your scales. It's easy to do, and you can
No,
always reference back to that.
let me just answer one of Brilliant Loser's questions. You shouldn't view ciphers in modern settings as physical objects.
Why
They
not?
they because they should be viewed more as motivation, inspiration. Like because if you're not using the core ciphers, then the subtle cipher deck or the asset deck are more assets to rolls.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't be you can't view it as how do I explain ciphers in a modern setting. It's like a movie. You ever see like when a mother sees her son pinned on the car, and you got this, and she gets that kick of adrenaline to lift the car up just high enough for someone to pull a son out. That's a cipher of you get two assets on your next strength task.
Right.
You know what I mean? You got to view it as stuff like that. You can't really view it as physical objects because you're right. It's not gonna make sense in the narrative, and two, it's gonna be hard to explain why can I hold certain. Why am I only holding a certain amount of ciphers?
Well,
And
here's the
you
thing.
can
Here's the thing. That's where you can mix it up. You can use subtle and physical, but
Yeah, I
physical
was just
cipher,
about to say that you can
you
add
know,
grenades
right. That's
as
what I'm saying.
ciphers and
That's
stuff
what I'm
like that.
saying. Things like that, things that you could actually say are real. You gotta, they find a machine gun with one burst left in it, stuff like that. You know, it really depends on like what you're doing with your game, but what you're saying, I think is very good. And I think it just goes both ways. You just got to be in both directions. You got to be more cognizant of what your world is offering.
And yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing, basically
Oh
what you
yeah,
said.
like
Where
that's a good one,
what?
Jason.
Oh yeah, yeah. But what you
That,
call it? Now I lost what I was gonna say.
I'm sorry.
No, just that. What you call it? You don't. Again, even though it might be hard to explain most physical ciphers that are in the book or whatever have you, don't be afraid to try to do it though, because again, there can be physical ciphers in a mod, like grenades or flare gun or whatever have you. Like,
do what I tend to do this a lot is take modern objects and replace the actual description of the cipher in the book with a modern object. So a cipher that gives you a D6 worth of assets on the speed defense roll is now cocaine. Um, what you call it, a cipher that gives you 2 assets on an intellect roll, is now a book or something, like random stuff
Right.
like that.
Something that gives you, a bonus on, effort, free level of effort. It
Yeah.
could be, it could be a lever, so you could prop something open or something. All sorts of stuff. He said, but kids don't do drugs. Yes,
Or
they do.
But don't do
it doesn't have
drugs,
to be
kids.
cocaine. It could be a Red Bull.
Yeah, Red Bull.
You
There we
know?
go, Red Bull. A pixie stick in a kid's game.
Yeah.
Pure sugar.
Yeah.
Oh boy, but I think this has been a great talk, Anthony.
Yeah. It's
Uh,
been fun. I don't know if it's been a great talk, but it's been a fun talk.
no, definitely. I mean, anytime we sit down and talk, it's fun. I don't know.
Yeah.
Whether we bring up actual good points or not, I don't know. But
And we appreciate everyone in chat giving us the great ideas to keep the conversation flowing. We really appreciate that.
yeah, 100%.
You
Definitely
guys
would.
come up with some good ideas. Trust me, I'm going to steal some of your stuff every time you put it in the chat. Just let me know. If you're
And,
playing one of my games and I say something that sounds familiar, yeah, you wrote it. You said it.
oh, hey, thanks for that gift. This up, Eric. You're the man. Dropping gifts.
Jake Bacon.
To Jake Bacon. I hope you enjoy that. I am going to be, we are going to be working on adding emotes soon. We're going to go the route of our faces. So expect to see some goofy or, funny or whatever have you little emotes down there. Or maybe we'll throw in an EXP or a Cypher Unlimited logo or something. Yeah, it's random, but it also goes to whoever happens to be watching a lot, or there is a sort of bias when you give the random sub. But either way, it's greatly appreciated, and hopefully Jake Bacon greatly appreciates it as well. But yeah, we should. And I do want to add a couple more, badges and stuff. Maybe that's where I'll put the EXP and the CU logos, just for our supporters. They'll see that next to their name, whether they be subs or bit donators or whatever have you. Definitely gonna try to up our Twitch side a bit more in the coming weeks. So stay on the lookout for that. And I think this is our 3rd stream or 4th stream as affiliates. It's not.
It's fourth.
We were still fairly new, so yeah, we really appreciate all the support when it comes to the Twitch side. It's been a lot of fun growing our Twitch and getting things going. Hopefully, we'll continue to improve things here, and yeah, with your support, that makes it a lot easier.
Absolutely.
And hopefully, I know we're going to be closing this out, but hopefully we'll have Sean K. Reynolds on next Wednesday to talk about not only God Forsaken, but he's also the lead writer on Claim the Sky. So we'll get to talk about the Kickstarter. We get to talk about God Forsaken. Sean's been on us. He's been interviewed by us, a couple of times, and I can't believe that he's coming back on to talk to us idiots. But God bless him. So
You two idiots. I'm a normal guy.
But yeah, we're really excited about that. So hopefully we can get him on. And so start thinking of your questions now that you want to ask Sean, either about God Forsaken, Stay Alive. He's run a ton of great books for Monica Games. So, there's a ton of things we could ask him. We're going to, I really want to know about the Kickstarter. And I really want to talk about God Forsaken.
Yes, I definitely want to hear more about that.
Yeah.
I don't know
Yeah.
when backers are getting the books. Hopefully soon, so maybe we'll have it in our hands before that. But
I believe no. I think it's the last week of November.
Well, it's still going to be nice to talk about it if he can share details. Hopefully he can tell us some goodies that are taking place within God Forsaken. But yeah, look forward to that hopefully next week.
And he'll be able to tell us, give us a little more clarity on Claim the Sky.
Yep.
And maybe give us some hints on what the new stretch goal is.
Yeah, that would be kind of cool. Yeah.
So, Anthony, you want to do a little normal?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for joining us. like we always said, we always gonna provide free content. But if if you find in the kindness of your heart to donate to us, we have a Ko-fi set up. You can give us a little cup or a little bit towards the cup of coffee. It helps us with little things like Zoom costs. Or you could also subscribe to our channel. Go to our YouTube channel where this will be up on the next day, and like, share, and subscribe that video as well. Please do that because it really helps us a lot, guys. The way YouTube algorithms work, the more people that like it or the more people that view it, it gets shown to other people that may not know us. So we really appreciate that as well. And last but not least, we have an online store. If you want some Cypher Unlimited swag, you can pick that up there as well. We got hats, mugs, t-shirts, and join our Discord server or our Facebook group. We run, we always on there chatting. We'll personally greet you. There's games being run there every day, either by us or so many of the other great GMs that are on there. We have a couple of them in chat right now that run great games. So if you want to chat about Cypher System, play Cypher System games, or just lurk and hear people conversate about Cypher, join our Discord. It's a great place to hang out. And last but not least, we love you guys.
That's it, Dean? Just a salute?
Veterans Day.
I dig it. But yeah, let's see who we can raid before I give my little sign off here.
We can raid the Ancient Albatross.
You want to raid me?
Yeah, we haven't raided you yet.
All right. We're gonna raid my personal Twitch, I guess, which is actually going right now. I'm just playing a game called Stream Raiders. It's an idle game, but we'll see it over there. And I'll go say hello to y'all over there. I really appreciate that for the suggestion, Anthony. But yeah, guys, as usual, this has been a fantastic talk. We appreciate y'all showing your support with the, especially Eric with the gifted subs and everyone else who has gifted or, subscribed. And wait, what is Bob saying? What time the Raiders will we? Can I time the Raiders? What do you mean time the Raiders? But either way, this has been a blast as usual. Look forward to next week where we talk to Sean. Hopefully, we need to get confirmation on that, but hopefully that'll go through.
And hopefully, too, a date hasn't been confirmed, but Latia is the new public relations manager. We've been playing DM tag, and she's definitely going to be on. I don't know if it's going to be the following Wednesday or the Wednesday after that, but we'll definitely have her on as well for an interview.
Yep. Exciting stuff coming out from us, or exciting people coming on to see us, I should say, which is nice. It's nice that people want to come talk to us. I'm not gonna lie.
God knows why.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, why even?
We're fun to talk to.
Either way, this is kind of getting stretched out, but thank you guys so much. I'm gonna set up the raid now. Raid at the Ancient Albatross. And as usual, guys, this has been a blast. Hopefully we'll see y'all next week for the next time we do our stream, whether it be Sean K. Reynolds or whatever we end up doing. And yeah, from us at the CU, we will see you later.
See you later.